thousands protest in Toronto. Opposition to a BC pipeline is growing, shutting down streets in the city and keeping trains at a standstill. Plus, will drones soon be delivering your packages? One company says it could happen sooner than you think. And
Mars will be getting closer and closer to the moon, and eventually the moon will cover Mars.
Mars makes a trip to the dark side of the moon, and one Toronto university is hoping to have a front row seat. Good evening, I'm Talia Ricci. Large crowds marched in support of the anti-pipeline protests happening across the country, shutting down traffic along Bloor Street for much of the afternoon. The group is standing in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs who are fighting the construction of a pipeline through their land. Lauren Pelly reports.
Wet'suwet'en supporters marched from the West End into Toronto's downtown core, blocking traffic for more than 4 kilometers. Their message today was one of solidarity.
I think at the moment there's a lot more awareness that reconciliation demands more than words.
There needs to be meaningful consultation with Indigenous peoples before building a pipeline.
For Michelle Bardock, an Indigenous resident visiting Toronto from Vancouver, it's an issue that hits close to home.
There's a lot of people feeling like they're losing their hope, and all the stuff that's going on is making a lot of people feel like reconciliation is dead and that the government doesn't care about these issues that they have talked about for so long. But then it's good to see that, you look at all these people, there are still so many people in support of Indigenous rights.
Those supporters braved hours in the cold to have their voices heard. Today's march follows weeks of rising tension, with blockades and protests similar to this happening across the country. That's brought much of Canada's rail network to a standstill, prompting fears of dire economic impacts far beyond the pipeline at the heart of this conflict. Elsewhere today, another anti-pipeline protest closed the Thousands Island Bridge near the Ontario-New York border for several hours. If these blockades continue, both the Canadian Propane Association and Retail Council of Canada warn there could be shortages of propane and consumer goods. CN Rail transports many of them, delivering $250 billion of goods every year, including food, coal, and fertilizer. Amid all the canceled service, the company has issued temporary layoff notices to roughly 450 employees, and close to 1,000 jobs could be impacted if the situation persists. Meanwhile, Via Train remains out of service across most of the country.
Prime Minister, what can we expect today?
Amid mounting pressure, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is committed to finding a quick and peaceful resolution. Burdock offered this advice.
Keep your promises, check your privilege, and listen with your heart.
As these protests have been continuing across the country, we got an update from Via Rail tonight saying that around 470 of their trains have been impacted so far, and around 94,000 passengers. And after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's meeting today, well, as you heard, he's hoping to find a resolution to this. These protests may show no signs of slowing anytime soon. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
The Prime Minister is grappling with how to end the nationwide demonstrations, which are growing in both size and cost. Justin Trudeau canceled a planned diplomatic trip to Barbados to instead meet with his government's incident response group. John Paul Tasker has more.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau convened an emergency meeting of key cabinet ministers today. There was only one item on the agenda: ending Indigenous protests that have crippled the country's transport network. Speaking to reporters after the meeting, Trudeau said there's more work to be done before this crisis is resolved.
I understand how worrisome this is for so many Canadians and difficult for many people and families across the country. We're going to continue to focus on resolving this situation quickly and peacefully, and that's what we're going to do.
The Mohawk protesters blocking CN and Via Rail operations in southern Ontario have dug in. They're vowing to stay until the RCMP leave the territory of the Wet'suwet'en people in BC. A meeting over the weekend between Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller and the Mohawk failed to produce any meaningful results. Ottawa maintains it's seeking to end the blockade through dialogue. That means avoiding direct action by police to forcibly remove protesters from the tracks, citing the Oka crisis and the Ipperwash standoff as bad precedents. CN Rail has started laying off workers, with no clear end to the protest in sight. John Paul Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
2 men are recovering from being shot last night in a mall parking lot. Police are looking for a masked man who allegedly ambushed them outside Promenade Mall in Thornhill. Ali Chiasson has the latest.
Aside from the multiple shell casings and the shattered glass, the vehicles inside the crime scene may tell us the most about what happened here. The person in the sedan was ambushed by a suspect police say wore a mask. The second victim, found bleeding outside of the car, is believed to have come from the tow truck. It's not the first time a tow truck has been part of a crime scene. Dozens have been set on fire, tow operators have been assaulted, threatened, shot at, and killed. And that's just in the last year and a half.
Police call it a tow truck turf war, and this may be the latest violent encounter. And people in the industry say tensions have been escalating.
It's very brazen.
Mark Graves is the president of the Provincial Towing Association, and he says toe-on-toe violence is particularly bad this time of year.
It's been a mild winter, and there hasn't been as much work as typical for a winter season, and I think there's a desperation to keep everybody working.
He says the bad players fight over turf like drug dealers do, but they chase accidents and overcharge.
When people are getting charged $2,000 and $3,000 to get picked up off the highway and taken 2 or 3 blocks, that's extortion.
And while they're at it, the bad players try to take out the competition. Graves says the province needs to beef up regulations.
A proper licensing model that has some teeth, so that if there are offenders and they're found to be guilty of something unreasonable, that their license could be revoked and they wouldn't be allowed to run tow trucks in the province.
The police haven't commented on the involvement of the tow truck in last night's shooting, but the victims are expected to recover, and they're still looking for the shooter. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Meteorologist Colette Kennedy joins us now for a first look at our forecast, and I really hope people soaked in that beautiful family day sun, because it doesn't seem like it's going to last much longer.
You got to tell you, that's right. We've got a storm moving in, and I guess at least the timing gave us that nice weather earlier today, but this coming in on our doorstep right now and having an impact, especially on the morning commute. We're looking at a special weather statement, so this is for some wintry weather, so travel advisory really. Snow 5 to 15 centimeters. Now, we won't be near that 15 for Toronto, but there will be areas higher elevations and over towards the east, and even maybe squeaking around as you approach the Niagara region, where we could see some enhanced amounts through here. But it's going to change over as the temperature rises to a mix and then some rainfall and getting quite windy as well. Here's how it moves in then overnight. Snowfall, then in the morning, you see where that mix begins, where the line is, and that will push across the GTA. This is why it's going to be slower. You need to allow some extra time. It's tapering off as we get towards lunchtime, and then just a little bit of flurry activity into the afternoon, but we may even see some sunny breaks. But just keep in mind, very windy conditions as the day wears on. A look at our temperatures then actually rising through the overnight, and that's why it's going to get above freezing and turn into a mix and headed to 5 degrees for the high, but it will feel a little cooler than that. I'll give you some exact accumulations for different spots so you can really plan for tomorrow coming up, Talia.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Global Affairs Canada has now confirmed 32 Canadians have been infected with the coronavirus. They're part of a group of about 3,500 passengers stuck on the Diamond Princess cruise ship off the coast of Japan. The ship has been quarantined for 10 days amid an outbreak on board. Ottawa says a plane will pick up Canadian passengers who are not showing symptoms sometime this week. Meanwhile, their American counterparts touched down in the U.S. today. The World Health Organization says a detailed report from China is offering better insight into the coronavirus outbreak, but officials say it's too early to tell if a decline in new cases will continue.
It also appears that COVID-19 is not as deadly as other coronaviruses, including SARS and MERS. More than 80% of patients have mild disease and will recover.
China has reported just over 2,000 new cases in the past 24 hours, almost all of which are in the worst-hit province of Hubei. China has reported more than 70,000 cases overall, with 1,700 deaths.
We're actually implementing customers as we speak and going live as we speak, so it's not a George Jetson kind of scenario.
Coming up, the new local tech that could deliver everything, even a cup of coffee, right to your door. That story after the break. The idea of a drone delivering your next online purchase might sound futuristic, but a local company says the idea is closer to reality than you might think. They're showing off some of their newest products right now at the Canadian International Auto Show. Nick Boisvert has more on what it'll take to bring the plans to life.
It looks like a small helicopter, and this is a very basic two-stroke gasoline engine.
They call it the Condor, and like the bird, this drone can cover huge distances in a single journey. We're talking 200 kilometers, and all of it with some serious cargo on board.
You just simply open it with the latches on the door, and inside you can see you could fit about 20 cubic feet and up to 400 pounds of cargo.
The Condor is one of the newest offerings from Drone Delivery Canada, a local company with ambitions to shake up and, yes, disrupt the way almost anything can be delivered.
We're actually implementing customers as we speak and going live as we speak, so it's not a George Jetson kind of scenario.
The company mostly shuttles cargo in rural areas and for logistics companies in places like Milton and Vaughan. In those settings, the drones land in designated areas with trained operators on the ground. But something more revolutionary could be on the way. Right now, Transport Canada doesn't allow delivery drones in urban areas like downtown Toronto, but people in the industry expect that to change and for these skies to look a little different in just a few years. Few companies have been promoting that idea as enthusiastically as Amazon, which has already delivered products straight to customers in limited cases.
I do see us being able to, get a coffee or a pizza delivered by drone to our backyard.
Experts say the technology to do that safely already exists, and that tweaks to aviation rules are the last major hurdle.
When there's a lot of momentum behind it, when there's a lot of need for it, I think things can move fairly quickly.
Beyond online shopping, Drone Delivery Canada says its fleet could carry medical supplies or cargo to oil rigs, all of it much faster than any truck or helicopter. Nick Boisvert, CBC News, Toronto.
It's a celestial game of peekaboo. Early tomorrow morning, Mars will be eclipsed by the moon, and one Toronto university is hoping to catch a glimpse of at their observatory. That story after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
You'll want to look up tomorrow morning for a rare celestial scene. If the skies are clear, you'll be able to see Mars disappear behind the moon. And if your view isn't ideal, York University will give you front row seats. Angelina King caught up with a professor who shares how the school's new telescope will be capturing the action.
So we're talking about the Moon-Mars occultation, and we can kind of describe it like Mars playing peekaboo, but explain exactly what people will be seeing in the sky tomorrow morning.
Yeah, so tomorrow morning around 7 a.m. you will see the sun start to come up, but you can see a beautiful crescent moon. Mars will be getting closer and closer to the moon, and eventually the moon will cover Mars and block it from view, and that's what the occultation is. It's going to go in one side and out the other, so we'll come in the bright side of the moon and come out the dark side, and it takes about an hour for it to go all the way across in this case. 7:25, that's when Mars starts to go behind the moon, and that'll take about 4 minutes for the disk of Mars to fully disappear, if you can see the disk, and it'll come out the other side around 8:49. If you hop outside around 7 a.m., you will see the sun's coming up a little bit, and you'll see the crescent moon, and you might see a little red dot moving closer and closer to that moon. Now, if you have binoculars or even a small amount of magnification, you'll be able to make out that red dot is Mars.
Tell us how often this happens, and then how often we're able to see it in the GTA.
This particular occultation of Mars by the moon will not happen again in 2020. So we won't be able to see it again until late 2021, but it won't be as good of a chance as we're going to get tomorrow morning.
Would we still be able to see it with binoculars or the naked eye if it's a little cloudy or snowy or raining in the morning?
Yeah, if it's a little cloudy and hazy, you probably will still be able to make it out. The moon is very, very bright. What you'll have a problem seeing is Mars. Mars is a little tiny point. It's about magnitude 1.5 or so, so it's not the brightest thing in the sky right now. And when the sun comes up, it produces so much more light in the general area. It gets hard to find with your naked eye. So binoculars, you could still see it, but it will get more difficult the cloudier it is. So snowing and raining would probably stop you from being able to see it, especially if you've got a big rain cloud. You won't even be able to see the moon.
So fingers crossed for clear skies, no clouds, no rain, no snow tomorrow morning.
York University's observatory will begin broadcasting photos on its website tomorrow morning at 7. They'll also be answering all of your space-related questions online. Colette's back now with our extended forecast, and I think people are probably wondering what their drives are going to look like the next couple of days with what's coming.
Yeah, that's right. And for tomorrow morning, Talia, my recommendation is definitely to allow a little extra time or take public transportation if you can. We do have a weather travel advisory for tonight, and that extends into tomorrow. We're looking at snow, first of all, then changing over to a mix and then becoming some rain as the temperature continues to rise. It will be mild, yet the winds will be so strong that that's going to kind of knock back in terms of how it feels. This is how it plays out then. It's on our doorstep now and starting to move into our western sections, coming across the GTA. Mostly a rain event, by the way, for southwestern Ontario, and that's why you're not in the weather advisories that we have in place. You see, as we're getting towards the morning, there could be some brief freezing rain, and then it kind of changes over to this mix and into rainfall because of that temperature getting well above the freezing mark by the afternoon. This has just stopped here at lunch. Yeah, it's still a little bit of rain, but it's kind of pushing away and drying out, and so there may be just a bit of drizzle hanging in there and some flurries into the afternoon, but also we'll probably see some sunny breaks beginning to develop. So it's going to move through pretty quickly. Still, it's going to have a chance to put down some snowfall. Accumulations may be in that 7 centimeter, perhaps, say 4 to 7 centimeters. I think closer to the lakeshore, we're not going to see them enhanced as much, but no, that risk is there. Hamilton, 7 centimeters, 3 for St. Catharines, Oshawa, 4 centimeters, and then you see, because it's mostly rain, still be messy, but you're not looking at serious accumulations back towards the Windsor area. So look at your conditions overnight as the temperature rises. You're reading this correctly. There's not a negative in front of these numbers, so 3 degrees temperature coming up. The winds will be increasing and eventually headed up to 6 degrees. Cloud cover in the afternoon. Most of the wet stuff is early in the day, and because it moves through quickly, here it is moving in overnight tonight. Those temperatures towards morning coming up towards 0 and then rising above, and that's where we get into that changeover, and then just a little bit of residual drizzle, a little wet flurry activity possible, but more so into the higher elevations here, and not so much that we'll see in the GTA with the readings like this in terms of our temperatures. Breezy conditions to go along with it, and then as we go into Wednesday, colder air moves in behind the front, so the high only -3, -12 overnight, and look at Thursday, sun back, but a high of just -6, Talia.
Well, I'm looking forward all the way to Saturday. Looks like a nice warm weekend could be coming our way.
Yeah, it's okay to keep looking ahead. Just find the day you like, and that's where we'll focus.
Perfect. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
A Toronto violinist is crossing one of his biggest dreams off his list, and he's only 13 years old. He was chosen to play at Carnegie Hall in New York. Natalie Nanowski has his story.
You wouldn't think this big sound is coming from these young fingers, but Lincoln Haggart-Eves already has about a decade of experience under his belt.
We used to play music for him when he was really young, before he could even walk or talk. We would play the Beatles and Coldplay. We just had a feeling that he had some sort of musical ability.
Lincoln started learning the violin a month before his 4th birthday. By the time he was 5, his passion was obvious. Before long, he was winning competitions, a lot of them.
I like the most probably learning new pieces on the violin because I like to branch out and explore different types of pieces.
The hunger shone through in this audition that his mom sent to Carnegie Hall in New York. for the American Protégé String Competition that's open to young international musicians.
I thought to myself, I'll just put Lincoln in and see what happens, and so I submitted the video, and then last Thursday we just got word that he placed, and he will be playing in the winner's recital.
I didn't really expect that to happen, but it happened, so I was really happy and excited when it did happen.
He'll be playing Chardes by Monty this June in front of hundreds of people. Nervous? Not really.
I just focus on the thing I'm doing, and it goes away, and then I do fine. This is probably the top thing I want to do, but I do want to be in an orchestra, like the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, or maybe just a national orchestra. That'd be neat. Yeah.
Until then, he's perfecting his skills and has some pointers for those trying to tackle the challenging notes in their lives.
I just try to, go slowly and do that section over and over again until it sounds good.
Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Vaughan.
What do you guys got planned for the rest of the day?
Probably just skate around and have a good time.
The skates came out for Family Day. We'll have more from the Bentway coming up after the break. Although the long weekend is coming to an end, it was a beautiful day to get out on the ice. We took a trip down to the Bentway to see how you spent your family day.
So our plans are basically to enjoy some activities in the city, go to some restaurants, eat, hang out with family.
Tacos.
Yes, he's all about his tacos.
We drove all the way down from Kitchener to do a family day skate at the Bentway.
It's pretty cold, but nothing I can't handle. My mom took my gloves because my hands are sweating. Happy Family Day!
And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll leave you tonight with some gorgeous shots of the icy boardwalk along the lake. Good night.